What's up, everybody? Welcome to another live episode of Strange Oddities Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Haas, and we have a really kind of a scary topic for tonight's show. I have a really amazing guest. As always, I try to have unique and interesting guests every week on Strange Oddities Podcast. So if you want to follow all the news, information, and upcoming guest info, please, I always ask, follow us on Facebook. If you haven't subscribed already, please click that little bell at the top right corner of our YouTube channel. If you haven't, I want to thank all of our recent subscribers, those who are tuning in or recently subscribed. Thank you so much, guys, because we are now over 260 subscribers in under 70 episodes. And I think that's really awesome. That's a great accomplishment for the podcast. So I want to, clap my hands, toward the audience and listener. Kudos to you guys for being subscribers to this podcast. Without you, I wouldn't be doing it. Get the boring stuff out of the way, guys. As always, we can't hear ourselves live. If there's a technical issue, you can't hear us, something bad going on, message me, let me know. If you have the email, strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Message me on Facebook. There's a chat. If you want to ask questions during the show, you can ask me or the guest. Throw them in the chat. I'll try to relay them to our guests as best we can. So without further delay, I want to go ahead and introduce this awesome gentleman that I have with us tonight. Like I said, it's kind of a scary topic for some if you went to Bible school or, Sunday school as, a young child, your parents took you, you learned about this a little bit. You may have learned about it going to church if you're a church going person, and you follow it a little bit. Modern day preachers and priests and pastors do preach about this topic a lot more. They're more open to discussing this with the public. And this gentleman is an author as well. He has some books about the topic, the end times, the rapture. Some call it the apocalypse of or the end of the world. It's discussed in many religions. There's many different perspectives, many different views, and all different religions about it. It really depends on what you follow and how you were brought up as well. I'm going to go ahead and give a little brief background on our guest for our viewers and listeners who don't know this gentleman. His name is Pastor Ryan Speakman. He grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and at 10 years old in 1977, his parents took him and his siblings to an old-fashioned barn meeting to watch the End Times classic, A Thief in the Night. And he spent a considerable amount of his life since then trying to better understand the topic presented that night and to share with others his many and sometimes startling discoveries. Mr. Speakman has a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Arizona. From there, he earned his master's degree in international business and economics from the Thunderbird School of Global Management, which he attended a full scholarship. Ryan has traveled extensively, including the Soviet Union from Moscow and Leningrad, if I pronounced that properly, hopefully I didn't botch that, to the Soviet Far East in 1987 and Argentina and Antarctica in 1991. 94, he spent a semester abroad in the former Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan. I hope I said that correctly. If not, my sincere apologies. In 1999, Ryan began writing his book series, These Final Days, as his research progressed. The centrality of Israel, especially Jerusalem, and most especially the Temple Mount in the end time story, became increasingly clear. And in May of 2012, he traveled to Israel to see for himself and to research firsthand many of the things that he had been learning and writing about. He's got a 2-disc DVD set, Israel: A Final Day's Perspective, presents Ryan's his boots on the ground point of view documentary of his experience in Israel. What I like about this gentleman, like I told him before we went on the air, I like how he relates the end times, the rapture, and everything that he speaks about in his writings and his work, how he relates to it with the average person that may not understand it. And the way he describes these things in his books, I think it's great. So I said I have to have him on the Strange Oddity podcast. So without further ado, without delaying him any further, and that I didn't want to botch any of those tough grammar words in there.
You
So
only botched one.
oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
the
Only
place
one.
where I spent a semester, it's called Kazakhstan,
Okay,
and no one can fault you for mispronouncing that. So,
okay.
yeah, former Soviet Republic, Central Asia. Yeah,
Nice. All right, one out of how many isn't too bad.
not bad at all. Not bad at all. Can I
Uh,
ask you, Matt, where did you get that blurb that you just read? Because it's familiar to me, but
oh, what the bio?
was that off Amazon or?
Yes.
The reason I ask is because I have to thank you because I have to go in there and update that because since I wrote that however many years ago, I've been to Israel 2 more times,
Nice.
including Gaza. I've spent time in Gaza City, and then
Right.
last April I actually spent 2 weeks in Lebanon. Stayed with a guy in Beirut, and yeah, had a good time. So, anyways, and then going to Africa this summer. Just
Nice. Nice.
yeah, trying to
I'm
get around.
super jealous.
You should come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's a lot of places I haven't been, and I'm only 45 years old. I still have a whole life ahead of me. I
Oh gosh, yeah.
I have things on my bucket list that I plan to do, and I really I commend you on your work so far and your journey, into this research about the end times and the rapture, and how you relate all this to the average people and the public, because it's a very tough subject to kind of dwell into and dive into, because of the metaphors in the Bible, the Book of Revelation. There's a lot of storytelling, somewhat, so you don't know what's real or isn't real.
Hmm.
Um, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
why don't you, gosh, before we dive real deep into this, what got you started? What's your passion like? Other than being a little kid and you had that experience when you were young, what really drove you to do this?
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, and that's such that's like the pivotal moment in my life in terms of this topic was that barn meeting, literally a barn meeting. We were in a barn sitting on bales of hay, an old rickety projector, and they played that movie, A Thief in the Night. If I remember right, the movie was produced in 1970, 71, I think.
Right.
And it was the same guy that actually produced The Blob, if you remember that movie.
I
Strangely
remember.
enough, yeah. Russell H. Downton was the guy's name. Anyways, so I remember, 10 years old sitting there, and the whole story was about how this, young girl gets left behind, to use Tim LaHaye's term. The rapture happens, and she's totally caught off guard, and so she's stuck on Earth, and, the Antichrist shows up, and the Great Tribulation. And, it's just like terrifying. So somebody says it's hard to hear me. Do I need to adjust something on my mic or?
Um, I hear you fine.
I'll try to speak. I'll try to speak up a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah, let me know if I need to get like a professional microphone for this sort of thing. But anyways, but yeah, I mean, very very terrifying stuff for a 10-year-old. And I remember at the end the pastor had an altar call, which is of course where do you want to get saved and born again? And I'd already done this probably a dozen times at that point. Well, I was the first one to run up and just terrified. I didn't want to get left behind. So long story short, on the drive home that night was the first time that I ever heard, that I recall, from the Holy Spirit. Now, right there, some of your viewers are going to think, okay, this guy's crazy. It wasn't audible, and I'm not saying that sometimes maybe people don't have an actual audible experience. For me, it was just very very strong on the inside, and the Holy Spirit, of course, being the representative of God, or part of God, right, the Trinity. But but he told me, he said, this is your topic. You're going to spend your life learning about this, teaching about this, and to this day I insist. He said, and one day you'll write a book. Well, I'm working on my third book right now. It's going to be a 5, maybe 6-part series. So I think I heard that part wrong. But 1999, I somebody at a Bible study that I just started to teach at our church here Lake Havasu City, Arizona. So we've been here for 24, 25 years, whatever it is. And he gave me this book called Revelation Unveiled by a very, very famous end times author, teacher, Tim LaHaye. So I would guess that you and most of your viewers, listeners, have heard of the Left Behind series, very, very famous. And Tim LaHaye is who wrote that. Well, this book, Revelation Unveiled, which he published that year in 1999, this is where he lays out his theology and his doctrine about the rapture. And I had never given it a second thought. I always assumed that what we were being taught as Christians was true and accurate. And that's this idea. It's called the pre-tribulation rapture. It's this idea that there's a terrible time coming, 7 years of great tribulation on the earth. This terrifying figure, the Antichrist, rises to power, and he starts killing, Christians and Jews too, incidentally. But God loves us so much, He's going to rapture us all out of here before that happens, all the Christians, right? And I actually had spent my whole life up to that point, even studying this topic, essentially every day since I was 10 years old, as crazy as that sounds. Just kind of assuming, okay, well, that must be right because that's what everybody was teaching, that's what I was raised on. Well, I went home that night. It was Labor Day week in 1999. I started to read Tim LaHaye's book, and I couldn't put it down, which is unusual for me with any book, even my own or especially my own. But I remember I was up till about 2:30 in the morning, just going back and forth because what I started to pick up on was these really extreme logical inconsistencies in this doctrine that again promises that all Christians will be rescued out of the earth before the bad stuff really starts. It just isn't true. It took me about 2.5 months beyond that weekend to finally put all the pieces together. But that night I realized the pre-tribulation rapture, which is what the entire at least evangelical part of the church is being spoon-fed. It's just false. It's just false doctrine. So that kind of became the central point of my entire teaching, ministry, writing, et cetera, to this day. And when I say to this day, literally, Matt, today I'm going back and forth with a guy on Facebook. I still, debate this on a regular basis. Not trying to be, argumentative with people, but just really trying to convey, what the Bible actually says. And what it actually says is that none of us are getting out of here. These times are coming. They're coming soon. I believe our generation. There's hundreds of reasons to believe that, right? But biblical, and otherwise. We're all going to go through the times that are coming. There are indeed 7 years of great tribulation coming upon the earth. You mentioned when you were introducing me about different religions having different viewpoints. Yes. Well, it turns out that in Judaism they also believe in a 7-year period of great tribulation, and in a figure that we call the Antichrist. They call him Armilus. Okay. Mm-hmm. Islam also has a 7-year period of great tribulation at the end of human history as we know it, and they have an Antichrist figure that they call the Ad-Dajjal. They also have a Messiah figure called the Mahdi. Maybe you've heard that term. Right. Now this is where it gets really, really interesting. Is you probably know Hinduism is more of a cyclical view of the universe and the realm that we live in. Meaning it's eternal. It just goes on forever. It keeps repeating these cycles. Buddhism, likewise, right? So of course they don't have an end times. It turns out they do. So the Hindus are also awaiting a 7-year period of great tribulation at the end of this age. So they believe that the universe at that point will get recycled. They're waiting for a Messiah figure called the Kalki, and then Buddhists also have a 7-year period of great tribulation. And all these religions are talking about this, today. And you said that this is, one of the reasons you wanted me on the show is because, the world just seems kind of like really tuned into this idea now. The Buddhists and the Hindus, likewise, right now we're looking at the world saying, okay, we're super close to this. So the Buddhists, 7-year great tribulation, end of the age, and then they call their Messiah figure the Maitreya. Okay, so kind of interesting, but again, my main shtick in this whole topic area, what I'm very well known for, is I take away all the good news for the Christian. I mean, not really. Like that's how it comes across at first, but we're not getting out of here. Every one of us will be on Earth to experience, whoever's alive when all this starts, which I think will be soon.
Yeah.
We're all
You
going
all,
to
you all better start repenting.
you know what? Just make sure you have Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm a pastor. I got to throw that in. You know, so
Yeah.
right.
Exactly. Yeah. It's ironic you started talking about that because what I started doing my own research, other than what I was taught, getting brought up into the world by my parents and going to Bible study when I was really young, and not remembering all that stuff, like I said, because I was young. And back then, you're like, what are you gonna do with this? You don't know. But when you get older, you start to realize, there's something going on here, and you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I started doing research on my own over the years, and just because I know, like deep in my heart, like I see things going on, and I can connect the pieces,
Yeah.
uh, of what's going on today and relate it to what's going on in Revelation, and with everything that you just talked about.
Yeah.
You know, it's really scary to kind of touch on. If you look at everything going on right now with, like, the war in Ukraine, and all the things that are happening around the world.
It's
And
connected. Yeah.
it's like, I kind of feel like, you don't have to personally give me your opinion about that, but I personally feel that we are at the very beginning stages of what we're referring to.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm teaching and writing, and a lot of people who aren't into this, I'm sure would be very very skeptical of that, and they would say, well, every generation has thought that, and that's just normal human psychology to look around, and I'm sure in the days of leading up into World War II, Hitler must be the Antichrist and all that, all that, those are all fair statements to make. But what we have to look at, and this is where my whole life's purpose, comes in here, is what does the Bible actually say about these things? And I'm not one of those Christian pastors, which is 99.9% of Christian pastors, as it should be,
Hmm.
that I only look at the Bible. Because what I feel very strongly. So you read my background, my education. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona. That's a very secular, liberal arts, state school, right? I have a master's degree from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Again, very very secular. It's the number 3 international. No, I'm sorry, number 4 international business school in the world.
Nice.
Number 1 in the United States. Very very secular. I'm very careful, very cautious to not get off into superstition and crazy ideas. And I mean, I'll be blunt. I doubt there's any pastors watching this now, so I'm not to be too scared to say this. I wouldn't be anyways. But so many pastors, and I think especially the ones who teach this topic, there's just too much of a tendency to just get into, superstition and our emotions
Right.
and completely ignore all the other pieces of the puzzle. Look, if this stuff is true, if God really did create this universe, if He created this world, if the Bible is true, if Jesus, Yeshua really is the Messiah, if the end times really is a thing, then it's got to line up with everything else, like nature and science and current events and politics and history and archaeology.
Right.
And I've been very very careful in my many years doing this, to factor all that in and do it carefully and soberly. I
Yeah.
just I really try to. This may sound bizarre considering what I'm talking about, but I really try to avoid sensationalism, at all costs.
Yeah.
So, and if I don't know something, I just say I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Three
I know.
words you never hear from another pastor. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
I'm kind of in that situation with what I do in my career, because I'm a security guard for an elementary school, and so the kindergarten class is always like asking me, because they're at the stage in their life where they're curious about everything, and they got to ask, what's this, why is this, all those tough questions,
yeah.
and I just sit there and go, I don't know, go ask that person.
Good for you. See, that's good. Yeah.
I want to
And it's
stay
like,
neutral because I don't want to tell them the wrong thing.
yeah, yeah. And as a pastor and as someone who, I'm known for having expertise in this field, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm never supposed to say I don't know. But I always, tell people, look, does this lend me less credibility or more credibility that I'm willing to admit? There are certain things in this topic area that I'm 100% certain of, and even that doesn't make it true. It just means I'm 100% certain. I would say most of what I teach, uh, and write, et cetera, et cetera. I'm more in the realm of like, 70, 80%. And then some of the stuff is just, wild guesses. And I say it, or even write it in my books. Seriously, this is just a hypothesis, nothing to back it up.
Right.
But what I was getting at before is, this question: Are we really close to the end times? And what the Bible actually says is it paints a very detailed scenario for us, like what the world will look like, and the geopolitical landscape will look like when all this stuff starts, when the Antichrist rises to power, and none of this existed ever in all of human history. Listen, world history was a major component of my studies in college and grad school, and I'm
Sure.
telling you that the Bible describes Israel as a nation, for example. Well,
Right.
Israel wasn't a nation for 2,000 years.
Hmm.
The Romans came in the year AD 70, about 30 something years after Jesus was on the earth, and they destroyed Jerusalem, they destroyed the temple. Israel no longer existed. And now, May 14th, 1948, all of a sudden Israel's reborn. It's never happened in human history that a nation and a people that ceased to exist, 2,000 years later, all of a sudden pops up again. The end time story, and I'm talking Old Testament and New Testament,
Right.
very detailed. It describes the Holy Temple standing on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Well, that didn't exist for 2,000 years. In fact, it still doesn't exist today.
Hmm.
However, the Jews are back in control of Jerusalem,
Yeah.
June 7th, 1967. They're back in control of the Temple Mount. There are major organizations with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, from around the world, who are actively working to prepare to rebuild the temple. And then we even see the political landscape, even in Israel itself, starting to shift in that direction, throughout the entire Middle East.
Right.
So, and then as far as the belligerents, the bad guys on the other side of the end time story, what the Bible describes, the Antichrist comes out of Damascus. He's backed by Iran.
Hmm.
Listen, Syria and Iran didn't even exist for centuries and centuries. They were reborn after World War I and World War II, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and everything got reorganized. And then the principal backer of Iran and Syria would be Russia. So you brought up the war in Ukraine, and it's another critique, and it's a fair one. What? Yeah, you're just reading the headlines and trying to attach it to the end times. No, it
Right.
really is true. you
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
yeah. I mean, Russia is showing itself to be a bad actor, really, a rogue state. The enemy of Western civilization. I'm not talking about the Russian people. I lived over there for a while. I've been
Yeah.
to that part of the world or several times. Wonderful people, but as a nation, that's Russia's role to play in the end time story. Even way beyond the Great Tribulation. The Bible says that Jesus comes back after the tribulation. He rules and reigns for 1,000 years, and toward the end of that period, Russia actually rises up and attacks Israel. Again.
Yeah.
So we just shouldn't be surprised. But yeah, just all the pieces of the puzzle are in place. So, and I could go into a lot more detail, but it's your show. What do you
Yeah.
want to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. I'm with you on that. Um. I'm gonna mention a gentleman. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. But there's another gentleman who actually is teaching like the Antichrist stuff and what he believes is in relation to what's going on in the world today. What I think is awesome, what he's doing is he's taking the timeline and drawing an actual physical timeline on like a whiteboard for a
Mhm.
visual for everybody to kind of understand and relate to Revelation and the talk of the rapture and the
Sure.
devil and understanding the dragon and the beast in Revelation.
Chapter
And
12.
right, and what the Antichrist is or who it is. But in his description, he kind of mentions there's more than one Antichrist, and what I thought was great, what he was trying to convey was like the
Yeah.
timeline thing. His name was Pastor Brian Jones. I don't know if you heard of him, but
I
um,
should.
yeah, I posted a video on it not that long ago. I threw it out there, but I just thought it was great the way he described it. And let me tell you, people, if you want to follow Pastor Ryan Speakman's work, that's like the greatest thing that like I can tell our viewers and listeners about like his writings and what he puts in his book, um, so that the average person can understand what's going on and how they can relate to um, Revelation and the things that you're teaching about. Because it's tough to understand, and it's very overwhelming. It's a dark, scary
Yeah.
topic, and some people are just like, it's in the Bible, it must be a story, or because all different religions have different perspectives, they don't know what to believe. My question for you, Ryan, is, which I think is a great question. When you were brought up, educational wise, like when you were learning about the rapture and the revelations and stuff, what made you more of a, this is what's going on? Like, what was it, something in your heart that went with it, or was it something in your mind, or was it like a little of everything? Like, what put you on the path to, this is really what's going on?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's definitely a combination of those things. So I mean, all of us have a spirit, a little piece of God in us.
Yeah,
There's this wonderful concept in Christianity that most Christians, the vast majority, I would say, don't even have a grasp on, and don't take advantage of this. But Jesus dying on the cross, what that ultimately did a lot of things for us. But one thing it ultimately did is open us up to be able to be filled with the Holy Spirit. So this is again part of the Trinity. So we have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Well, the
yeah,
Holy Spirit up to that point had only resided on a permanent basis in the holy temples in Jerusalem, right? But we call it the day of Pentecost. But if we're filled with the Holy Spirit, then we're really tapped into. We're able to hear things from the Father, from God, that we might not otherwise, or that we would never, hear otherwise, right? So I have to give credit where credit is due. So much of the revelations that I've gotten over the decades, and I'm still getting, is just because I tap into the Holy Spirit. What is He speaking to me, right? But God also gave us all, each of us a brain, and it's a wonderful tool. And of course, that factors in, too. I kind of have a natural curiosity. I love to, study and learn. But I'm learning all the time, and I mean, I'm the last person on earth who would claim to, know it all. And listen, there by many orders of magnitude, two end times guys will never agree on everything.
sure,
Period.
yeah,
Okay, um, yeah. It's like the old joke my rabbi friend tells me: ask any two rabbis a question, you'll get at least three different answers. Right? But I'm learning as I go. So
right, yeah, no,
yeah,
I totally understand, yeah.
yeah.
uh,
But just my whole life, kind of watching things unfold around me. So
sure,
like the
can
rest.
you Yeah, sure. Can you, in your own way, for our viewers and listeners that don't know what the rapture is, maybe explain to them in a simple term, or meaning of what the rapture is to somebody who never went to church or never went to, Bible study or church at all, and they wanted to learn about it.
Right.
What are some ways that you could tell our listeners a little bit about it?
Sure. I would recommend everyone start with First Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 17, and that's where the Apostle Paul is writing to the church at Thessalonica, and he's telling them about this event, and he's saying, look, I know some of your loved ones have passed away, but don't lose hope. And then he describes for them what we call the second coming, that Jesus is going to come back, and when he comes back, Paul writes, the dead in Christ will rise first. So that's what we call the resurrection. So people who are any people of God who have died up to that point, and are buried or whatever, they'll be physically resurrected from the graves. And then immediately after that event, then it says, those of us, Paul writes, those of us who are alive and remain shall be caught up together to meet them in the air, and that's we'll be with the Lord always, right? So that's what the rapture is. It's that idea of being caught up in the air to meet Jesus, and also these resurrected saints now who are also up in the air, right? But what it's been kind of twisted and warped to mean to most Christians who even believe in end times And you might be surprised, Matt, that most Christians on earth don't. So there's 2.2 billion Christians worldwide. 85% don't believe in an end times. They think that all this was fulfilled back in the time of Christ, or is just symbolic or whatever. But the 15% of us, which is still 350 million people, who believe in an end times, 94% of that 15%. So most who believe in end times believe what the rapture has been twisted into, which is the idea that, hey, we don't just meet Jesus in the air, but we keep on going with him, up to heaven. He takes us up there, and for 7 years we kind of have a party up there while the earth just goes to hell.
Yeah.
And but it just isn't what the Bible says. It's not what the Bible teaches. But that phrase that Paul uses, caught up, and that's in Revelation chapter 4, and it's verse 16. Shall be caught up together to meet them in the air. I'm sorry, verse 17. That phrase "caught up" in the Greek, the original Greek was harpazo, and then in the 4th century A.D., there was a gentleman working in Bethlehem, of all places, in the grotto under the Church of the Nativity. I've been there. And he wrote what's called the Latin Vulgate, and he translated harpazo into the Latin word rapiemer, and that's where we get the word rapture. So anyone who says, "Oh, the rapture isn't, scriptural, it's not in the Bible," it is. The actual word is right there. You just have to read Latin. That's all, right? So now, what I would challenge people to do is if they really want to understand about the rapture, well, I can make it easy for you. My website is thesefinaldays.org.
There you go.
Okay, thesefinaldays.org. And scroll down to the bottom of my main page, and there's an ebook there that's 100% free. Just click it to download. It's a PDF. Right. It's short. It's 9 pages long, and it explains why I teach what I teach, which is, very different than what most end times guys teach. Right? That we're going through the Great Tribulation. If you compare Paul's words in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, go back and look at who he's actually quoting when he writes that, which is Jesus himself. Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. And there Jesus says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, and this is after Jesus just spent, a dozen and a half verses describing the 7-year Great Tribulation and the reign of the Antichrist. In fact, Jesus actually coins the term Great Tribulation there. Matthew chapter 24, verses 21 and 22. For then there will be great tribulations, such as has not been since the beginning of time, or the world, nor ever shall be, and unless those days were shortened, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect, those days will be shortened, meaning the elect, us, we're going to be here, right? But and then he describes the Antichrist and everything. But Jesus says immediately after the tribulation of those days, he says, then you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of power and great glory, and he'll send his angels to gather together his elect from the farthest part of earth to the farthest part of heaven. Mark and Matthew, kind of phrase it differently. Matthew says the four winds, which we know is a sailing term, meaning like the four corners of the earth, right? So in other words, Jesus very plainly describes the rapture. Again, Matthew 24, 29 through 31, but he says that it happens immediately after the tribulation. When we compare Jesus' words to Paul's words over in 1 Thessalonians, everybody says that Paul is describing the rapture. Every pre-tribulation rapture teacher out there, or mid-trib or whatever. Right. But when you compare the two, they have 5 extremely unique points in common. Jesus shows up in the sky. How often does that happen? Never. Right? Very unusual. Right. Highly conspicuous. It's very, very loud. Can be seen worldwide. Right. Right. There's an accompaniment of angels. Paul says it, and Jesus says it. They both do. There is this mention of a trumpet, okay, a great trumpet blast, yep. Right? And then finally, number 5 is the believers are caught up in the air to meet Jesus, right? So any court in the land, any judge, any jury, any honest, college professor, they're going to say, give me a break. They're clearly describing the same event. Paul's describing the rapture. We all agree with that. Well, Jesus very clearly says it doesn't happen until after the 7-year Great Tribulation and the reign of the Antichrist. And what happens at that point? We meet him in the air, and then we accompany him on his full descent down to earth. He alights, upon the Mount of Olives. I've been to that next spot. Okay. Yeah. Because it's where he ascended, 40 days after his crucifixion, 40 days. And and then we will live and reign with Jesus here on the earth from there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what the rapture is.
Yeah. And during that time, also, if I'm not again, you kind of touched on it a little bit. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are supposed to show up around that time, also, right?
So it's a great question, and that gets more tricky. Okay, so the four horsemen, that's Revelation chapter 6 and 7, right? And going a little bit into chapter 8. But well, I'm sorry, the four horsemen are in chapter 6.
Right.
They constitute the first. They're also called the first four seals on this scroll that only Jesus is worthy to unfold, right? And there
Yes.
are seven seals on the scroll. Well, the first four seals are referred to as, like you just said, the four horsemen, right, of the apocalypse.
Right.
And my model that I really fleshed out, and this is based on my college education, again, international relations, world history, and all that. I actually believe that the four horsemen are riding as we speak, and the first horseman actually set out. And this is going to sound crazy when I say it. Let me explain. And I think, and this is a little bit arbitrary, my dates, but I'm putting the date at 1776. So
Okay.
you might think, oh, that's one of those guys. He's a a major patriot, mix it with Christianity and all that. Well, no, the reason is because the first horseman is describing imperialism, nations going out to conquer other nations, and that started because of industrialization, which we can trace directly back to this. My college education talking here. We can trace directly back to the beginning of capitalism. Okay, well, in 1776, that was the year of the American Revolution.
I
To
was just going to say
coincide
that.
with, right, yeah, to coincide with that, there was a Scottish economist named Adam Smith, who in that year wrote an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, or we
Hmm.
call it the Wealth of Nations for short. The book's like that thick. I've got it sitting on my bookshelf right over there. Read it for school. Oh my gosh! But
Nice.
so I actually argue that was that's when the first horseman set out riding, and the other horsemen describe World War. Okay, we know that imperialism naturally led to World War One, and
Right.
then finally World War Two, right? And then great global economic disparity, which never really existed. It didn't exist until after World War Two, because when the world came together, the United Nations, we decided to put an end to imperialism. Uh, the economies around the world that for a century and a half or longer had been subjugated to the big empires like the United Kingdom, the United States, Japan, Germany, France, Belgium, they were decimated. So today you have 2/3 of the planet living in poverty and a third living in relative luxury by comparison. We're in that top third, by the way. In fact, United States, we're like at the top of the heap. But that's the third horseman. Okay, if you go look at it, it's pretty clear when you look at it through that lens. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think
No,
so. I think so.
that,
And then finally, the fourth
brought up
one.
not to interrupt you real quick, but the
Oh,
timeline that I brought up before, when you see what's going on today, like everything that you're talking about is like to a T.
yeah, yeah. And the four horsemen, they're riding right now. I'm 100% convinced of it.
Wow.
And again, that's one of those things where, okay, just because I'm convinced doesn't make it
Yeah,
right.
I'm
But
sorry. But go ahead.
yeah, not at all. But the fourth horseman, of course, is the pale rider. That's the most famous one, right? And death follows with him. Well, the idea is that imperialism, the first horseman, naturally leads to the second horseman, World War, which naturally leads to extreme global economic disparity, which naturally leads to the fourth horseman, which is just worldwide death by war and famine and disease. And if you look at the raw numbers from the different United Nations organizations, I'm not just making this stuff up. I mean,
Oh,
look at the statistics,
oh yeah.
and our world today. It's never been like this in all of human history.
No.
The wars and the disease and the famine, and we think, oh well, things aren't that bad. Well, you have to look at human history. Things are incredibly dark right now compared to times past. And
Yeah.
and just since the year 2000, I mean, my gosh, just in the last couple decades, it's like the snowball going down the mountain. It's picking up speed and getting bigger and bigger. And are we imagining it? I don't know. Keep watching.
Keep praying.
Yeah. Anyone who is remotely tuned into this stuff, and again, doesn't have to be a Christian, doesn't have
Right.
to be, Jewish or whatever. Anybody who's even atheists, agnostics, anyone who's paying attention, we all have this feeling that this is, we're very rapidly heading towards some major cataclysmic climax to this world
Yeah.
that we live in,
Right.
and the Bible predicts it,
Yeah. I
and all
know.
the pieces are in place,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's funny because I always like used to call myself agnostic, or I didn't really pertain to any kind of religion because I never went to church. I never found my place in a church or found my religion as far as if I'm Christian, if I'm Catholic or Protestant. I grew up Protestant because that's what my family brought us up into. But
yeah,
as you get older, you change. Your views change.
absolutely.
you know. But my wife is like, she's like, Matt, but you're actually very spiritual. You're very religious because when I research all this stuff and everything, and when I'm reading about everything, she's like, but that's like part of religion. That's part of being spiritual.
You're,
So
you're, you're tuned into the spiritual realm. Yeah, exactly. And I've had a few people say to me, why are you doing this show called Strange Oddities? And I've been playing this up. I love it. I'm like, yeah, he does like UFOs and aliens, and he had a couple Catholic exorcists, a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
But yeah, I very quickly looked at your stuff when you sent me the email and invited me on the show, and yeah, I see that. You're tuned into the spiritual and the unusual, and that's a man who has a heart toward the same stuff I do. I think so.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
No,
it's not about religion. It's not
no,
Catholic, Protestant, even Muslim, whatever. I just encourage everybody to seek a personal relationship with God and ask Him to show you.
yeah,
Don't listen to me. Just talk to God. And even if you don't really believe He exists, if you just take that one step, God, if you're there, dot dot dot, and then open yourself up to it. And it's not about going to a particular church or putting the tie on Sunday morning or
right,
saying the right jargon. God doesn't care about those things. He really doesn't. He,
right.
he just he just wants a personal relationship with each and every one of us.
Exactly. And that's great you brought that up because that's exactly what like me and my wife always talked about. We were like, yeah, we don't have to belong to anything. We don't have to go to anything. As long as you feel what's right in here in your heart, and that relationship you have with God feels right, and like to me that's all that matters.
Yeah, and always be asking Him. So we want to make sure that at the end of the day, that ultimately it's not based on, what I think or what I feel inside or whatever. But
Right.
God, just show me, and then be open to it. And it's the hardest thing in the world for human to humble ourselves like
Yeah.
that and to. But I'm open every minute of every day. At least I want to believe I am. I endeavor to be to hear from God and change
Yeah.
my mind and change my heart.
Yeah.
He knows He's got the answers, and he's a
He's
loving
always
God.
right.
He's not out to squash us all like bugs. I mean, He wouldn't have sent Jesus to die on the cross for us if that was the case. I mean, God has gone to tremendous lengths over the millennia to try to reconcile His creation, us, back to
Yeah.
Himself.
Yeah.
That's His true heart. So,
Exactly. Yep. So, like I said, if you really feel that there's something to what's going on, what we're talking about, as far as the rapture and the beginning of the end times, just find your relationship with God now before it's too late. Because,
yeah, I'm
um,
glad you're saying
I,
that. You
yeah, like I just think like people need to start like start to listen and pay attention and see what's going on because there's going to be a lot of lost people out there when
Yeah,
stuff hits the fan.
absolutely, absolutely. And listen, even among Christians. So Christian pastor. I have no illusions about the body of Christ. I mean, there's so much deception. You said that a lot of people be lost. A whole lot of Christians will be lost, and that's biblical. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, he actually writes about during the last days, during the time of the Antichrist, there would be a great apostasia is the Greek word, which of course is in English apostasy, a
Right.
great defecting from the faith by a whole bunch of Christians. He doesn't give a number, but we get the impression it's a large number, and he says it's due to deception Interestingly, the only deception he names in that whole passage, it's 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. He gets really hardcore in there. But the only deception that he mentions is a false belief that we're going to get rescued out of here before the Antichrist shows up. Paul himself is warning us, no, listen, body of Christ, you will be on earth to face the Antichrist, and believing otherwise is deception. And then he goes into this stuff about the great apostasy. And yeah, it gets kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So my point is this: even most Christians, like if you have any Christian viewers, I assume at least some of your viewers are. Chances are, if you believe in the end times at all, you believe in this doctrine called the pre-tribulation rapture, and it's so dangerous because listen, Matt, if I'm a Christian and I believe that I'm going to get rescued out of here before all the bad stuff starts, what happens when that doesn't happen? When the bad stuff starts and the Antichrist shows up and I'm still here, can you imagine the disillusionment and angry at God and forget this whole thing? I was lied to my whole life. This is all set up. It's all set up. This is, and it was all predicted thousands of years ago that this is what we'd be seeing in these last days. So yeah,
that's crazy. And I don't know. Do you think like we'll see it in our lifetime or not quite yet? Like as far as
I'm being 100% honest about this. It's not just because I write books or teach or this is my hobby or whatever, but it's more the other way around. No, I mean the signs are happening so rapidly, and the world is changing so quickly. And I mean, I believe this since I was a kid. The 1970s.
Yeah.
And even then, imagining what we're seeing in the world today, and again, just how the pieces line up. But I'll give you a really interesting example, and it's a little bit complex. I'll keep it simple as best I can. Sure. But the framework for this last 7 years. Remember, I said that all the world religions believe in this 7-year tribulation. The framework for it is described in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, and the archangel Gabriel is delivering this prophecy to the prophet Daniel, and the term used there is week, but it's a week of years, not a week of days. So it's a 7-year period, right? That's a 7-year tribulation. But the framework that Gabriel conveys to Daniel, which we're supposed to get this, we're supposed to understand. I mean, we have access to this in the Bible, right? But it's a 7-year peace treaty between Israel and some of its neighbors, and on the other side of this treaty are the forces who are coming against Israel, right? And when we look at all the other details that even 2 chapters later in Daniel chapter 11. Gabriel goes into detail about, who the Antichrist is, where he comes from. Again, he comes out of Damascus, comes down from Syria, backed by Iran. Now, this is interesting because this was centuries before Islam even existed, more than 1,000 years before Islam even existed. And the scenario that we see in the book of Daniel is there'll be some group that is connected through religion up in the north, going from Lebanon, Syria, over to Iran, right? Who are in opposition to some other group connected by religion to the south that surround Israel, right? So what that describes, what's Lebanon, Syria, Iran got in common? They're all Shia Muslim. It's Shia Islam, okay, the Shiites, right? Everybody to the south, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Bahrain, Sudan, right? Morocco. They're all Sunni Muslims, and these guys have been at war with each other. See, we don't know this in the West because we don't study about this. The Sunnis and the Shia have been at war with each other all the way back to right after Muhammad died. So we're talking about,
Oh yeah, they've been at it forever. Yeah,
1,400 years they've been, and it's been a bloody war. And I mean, to this day, you'll hear about somebody blew up a mosque and wherever, and Turkey, whatever, and it's like, oh, the Shias blew up a Sunni mosque or the other way around or whatever. And I saw this when I was in Lebanon. I mean, we go to a Sunni village over here, then there's a Shia village down here, right? But this is what's interesting. Under the Trump administration, and I'm not getting into politics because who cares, right? I look at the bigger picture. But Trump's son-in-law served in his administration. That's Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner spent the entire Trump administration focused mainly on trying to bring about peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Well, there was a bigger game that was actually happening in the background that none of us, saw until late in the Trump administration, and that turned out that peace deal turned out to be, just a bargaining chip in a much bigger, much more important treaty. We call that, which is, do you know what I'm getting at? The Abraham Accords. You've heard of that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so the Abraham Accords, it's unheard of. I mean, these countries in the Middle East who the minute that Israel declared, statehood, May 14th, 1948, all these Muslim countries surrounding Israel, I mean, 2 dozen of them attacked Israel, tried to destroy it. They couldn't do it. They tried again in 1967. They tried again in 1973, the Yom Kippur War, right? They tried to a lesser extent, like 1981, 82, 83. But all of a sudden, just a few years ago, we see the United Arab Emirates, we see Bahrain, we see Morocco, we see Sudan, all sign peace agreements with Israel. And you know what the main point of the agreement is? I mean, read any article; they come right out and say it. It's their mutual fear of Iran. So
uh,
this chessboard that the Bible describes, written down, 2.5 millennia ago, could have never existed throughout all of human history. We're
yeah,
seeing it. We're seeing it. The Abraham Accords. They're establishing a treaty between Israel and its Sunni Muslim neighbors, and they're going to stand in opposition against Iran and the Shia Muslim nations.
right. Well,
So
Iran wants to blow, Israel off the face of the earth.
they
you
come
know,
right out and say it. I mean, it's in their speeches and everything. Yeah, they want to wipe Israel from the map, is the way that they put it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we see the nuclear deal, trying to happen again, and it's just all part of the story. So,
sure,
and there will
yeah,
be nukes involved when the time comes. It gets pretty ugly. So, hey, can I
yeah.
give you a hint, Matt? Just between me and you, when we're getting toward the end of the Great Tribulation, make sure you're out of New York.
Oh yeah, no,
Just saying.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Hey,
yeah,
you talk about coming out west. Just pack your bags. So
yeah.
yeah,
Go far west as possible.
yeah, go
Although
western, man.
west is closer to Russia, and they have uh they're closer in distance as far as the West and Russia goes. So I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle.
Well, it should be the middle because honestly, and I'm being lighthearted and trying to be funny about this, but
Right.
it's actually very serious. So the 7 year Great Tribulation actually will begin, and this is right out of the Bible, Revelation chapter 8, with a major cosmic impact event. Sounds crazy. Go read it for yourself. Okay, it's the first four trumpets. It's Revelation chapter 8. They're like one verse each, so it'll take you all of 5 minutes to read it. But when we're done with this podcast, Matt, I encourage you go read Revelation chapter 8. Just and you'll see it's a major cosmic impact event. And just based on the whole story and some other parameters, I told you I try to factor in like actual reality and science and everything. I really think that there's going to be a major meteor hit to the Pacific Ocean, and that will start the 7 year Great Tribulation. It's all in the context of that treaty, but this all happens at the same time, right? Um, which is going to result in tidal waves that are 300 feet tall. Maybe that's a conservative figure. Actually,
Hmm.
could be much larger. So don't be on the West Coast. But then toward the end of the Great Tribulation, the Antichrist actually attacks the hegemon, whoever the global hegemon is. And very long story short, the spirit of global hegemony, it's gone from the city of Babylon to the Medo-Persian Empire to the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, finally the Western Roman Empire, which is what is the hegemon today. We are Rome,
Yeah.
the United States of America. But the spirit actually resides on a single city always, and that city is actually New York City. The Antichrist, in response to us trying to defend Israel during the last half of the Great Tribulation, is to nuclear New York City. Go
Oh,
read Revelation chapter 17, 18. It's a horrible thing to say. Listen, man, I grew up on the West Coast. I don't say this lightly. A tidal wave is going to wipe it out. I've been to New York City several times. I love the city. Whatever people say. My wife and I tried to take our daughter there last October, but because of the pandemic, we finally decided, we'll do Disney World instead.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
sure.
I love New York. I'm not saying this stuff because I want to see it happen, but
Yeah,
it's biblical. It's prophecy,
it's
and
there.
and we must be right there, Matt. I mean, you asked before, do I really think it's in our lifetime? Yeah, I really do. I really do. It's
I know.
it, it's all happening faster now than I ever would have imagined it would at this point.
Yeah. Um, What did you think? I know some people out there hate when I reference movies, but I generally, when I mention movies, it's only because of comparison comparing the concept of the topic of what we're talking about.
Oh, I love it. I think that's an important connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Human
Well,
culture, you know.
yeah. What did you think of the movie? If you ever seen it with Mimi Rogers, The Rapture with David Duchovny, I thought that was a pretty good portrayal of what the Rapture was in relation to the average people. No, so, like I don't know if you ever saw it, but
I have seen every movie about the Rapture. I don't think I've seen that one.
oh really?
I'm ashamed to admit. I don't think I've seen. You have to send me the IMDb on it.
Yeah, I will because
I will check it out. Yeah.
yeah, and
I
how
mean, I
to
know Mimi Rogers and David Duchovny. They did a movie about the Rapture. Why wasn't I notified? I'm curious.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, he was like super young. It was like I think in the early '90s. Like this is like before X Files was popular.
Yeah.
He was just starting out really.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, I thought the Rapture that movie was like really great as far as relating to the average public of
Mhm.
what Rapture was about and how it affected pe- average people of everyday people doing everyday live things.
Yeah.
You know, people going about their business and all this dark stuff is going on. And there's this one lady, just to give a little premise of the story, Mimi Rogers, who is, torturing herself a little bit because she doesn't believe. She doesn't believe.
Mhm.
I think she's
I love
atheist,
her. She's a great actress. Yeah.
right? And all the rapture is in its beginning stages, and all these things are taking place, and it starts taking an effect heavily on people's minds and how they react to what's going on, and especially her with her daughter. She's like a single mom taking care of her kid, and she kind of lives this like um kind of like open lifestyle where she like goes out and parties. She throws caution to the wind kind of thing, and
Sure. Yeah.
because of her, she doesn't believe, so she takes bigger risks with the dangers in her life and doesn't really think about the consequences until the rapture starts to take place and take effect, and
Yeah.
then like, it starts to weigh heavy on her mind, and it starts to really play like a psychological role, which I think is an awesome way of implementing how the rapture could affect a person's psychological mind and
What's
their,
what's what's
their
what's the name of the movie?
it's
Um,
called Rapture.
it's actually called The Rapture. Oh
Yep.
gosh. So you know what I'll be doing tonight?
Yeah.
It's only 6 o'clock here, so I'll be
Yeah.
renting on Amazon. So seriously,
Yeah. No.
I'll email you tomorrow and say, hey, I watched that movie. So,
I mean,
yeah.
it was like when you rate movies back in the day, it was a B movie. It wasn't like it wasn't like Armageddon with Bruce Willis. It
Oh yeah,
wasn't like
every movie about the Rapture is a B movie.
yeah.
Yeah, like
But
I said, the Russell H. Downton, who did like the quintessential Rapture movie, A Thief in the
right.
Night, his most famous work, 1958, The Blob.
Yeah.
I mean, come on,
Yeah.
right? How kitschy can you get? You know.
Yeah. Exactly.
You
But
know, it's funny though, because you bring up movies and okay, yeah, like actual, movies about the rapture, the Christian concept are B movies. They're cheesy and all that stuff, low budget. But then you mentioned like the Bruce Willis, movie, right? And think of all the apocalyptic literature and movies that we see out there that they're not necessarily based on the Bible, maybe not at all, but look how pervasive it is in human culture. Humans are fascinated with this concept, right? So Viggo Mortensen, The Road is one that comes to mind. It's kind of an obscure one, but that's one of my favorite ones. Deep Impact with Tia Leone, probably
yeah.
pronouncing her name wrong. That's another one of my favorites. But
Right.
but like every year we're getting TV series or yeah, even the Marvel stuff, right? I mean, isn't that really like apocalyptic literature in a way? Thanos is coming and he wipes out half the universe. This is ingrained in the human psyche. It's ingrained in the human spirit because again, we're all parts of God. God created us, and
Yeah.
we're engineered to be tuned into to what's happening around us. That's why this genre is just so huge now.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I think it's great that, even though it's Hollywood, but like you said, if it can help a person relate to that subject and then learn more about it, through that path, or that, guide them, to teach more about it, in another way, then I'm all for that.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. God, Matt, you should be a pastor, man. You're good at this. No, really, because I mean that's getting to the heart of people. Listen, Jesus himself. Do you know how he taught? He taught in parables. What are parables? They're stories. So I agree with you. Even if on the surface it seems to have nothing to do with the Bible or whatever, if it taps into something inside of me here, right, and
Yeah,
gets me thinking about these things, that's a very good thing. I want. I'd like to see. I know God would too. Everybody out there, pay more attention, get more serious about this. Most people, we want to stick our heads in the sand because it's scary. We want to believe everything's okay. Where have you been the last 3 years? I mean, this stupid COVID-19 pandemic. This is very much a type and shadow of what's coming. This is we're being prepped for what's ahead, right?
yeah,
So it's already happening. We can ignore it. We can pretend it's not there. Um, and, either way, it's there, and
yeah,
either way, it's scary. But if we're tapped into the one who created us, and who knows the full story, and who is ultimately going to be triumphant, that's the least scary place that we can be.
yeah,
Really,
ab-
still
100.
scary, but
Yeah, it
you know,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
it is what it is. So
yeah, exactly. But I do. I try to like on the show, like there are topics that I get on my show, and it's, yeah, they're dark, they're scary, and I try to lighten it up, and by describing what people do in modern times and how they can relate and connect, because I think it's better for them to understand in ways that they can understand.
yeah,
you know
people need to, and look, yeah, Revelation. You said early in the show, it's big and it's confusing and it's scary, and it's 22 chapters long, very very big book, and
yeah,
and again, it's called the genre is called apocalyptic literature, meaning a whole lot of symbolism, and you said, I forget how you phrase it, but basically, how much of this is literal, how much is symbolic. It's extremely challenging. Listen, I've been at this my whole life, and wouldn't it be great if everybody thought that I knew it all? And I'm being facetious when I say that because I don't. I mean, I'm
yeah,
learning something new every single day. I would, humbly invite everybody if you want to learn with me. I mean, I teach, every other week at my church. I've got a radio show that's
nice.
real radio. We broadcast throughout the whole, Southwest region, and then we turn that into a podcast. I've got my book series, These Final Days Part 1 and These Final Days Part 2 right there, right, available on Amazon. But yeah, just go to thesefinaldays.org. You can learn more about my ministry, and again, just trying to be completely open, completely humble before God, and our fellow man, right, fellow humans, and to just be open to learn,
Yeah,
and God rewards us.
yeah,
He's not trying to hold back. He wants to give us understanding. He wants to give us revelation. But Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is like a great pearl hidden in a field, and you go and sell everything you have to buy that field. Okay, that's great. But then what do you have to do? You have to get a shovel. You have to get a pickaxe, and you have to start digging. And that's what I've spent my whole life doing, and I'll never stop until Jesus comes back and says, "Oh man, you were so far off. This is what I could." No, hopefully that doesn't happen. But I'll always be learning.
yeah.
So
That's great because yeah, I always tell people all the time, uh, the old saying, you can never teach an old dog a new trick. That's a lie. You can teach
yeah,
an old dog a new trick because you should be learning every day. You can
are
always
you are you calling me an old dog?
learn.
You,
Yeah.
you want to hear some? September 12th this year, I'm turning 55. Official senior discount.
Oh,
So
nice.
you can
Congrats.
call me that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. I mean, there's no excuse. Any age, we should always be learning, and the only thing that counts in that effort is just being open minded.
Yeah.
You just can't be so set and so dogmatic,
Yeah.
and so prideful to think that you know it all and you got all the answers. We don't. We
Yeah.
don't. God does,
Yeah.
but He hasn't given me all of them yet. So
Yeah.
still waiting, right?
Yeah. Right.
The process.
Um, I would like to real quick, because we're at the bottom of the hour already. We can go.
Yeah,
Like,
wow, boy, time flies, huh? You
yeah,
having
it
fun?
does. This topic is heavy. We could go on, about it like for hours and hours.
Yeah.
And I totally would because I'm all for it. But anyway, long story short, I'd like to share an experience with you that me and my wife did have an experience a couple of years ago, and actually it would make global news because nobody knows or heard of what this could be. Now, there were strange sounds all over the world, in different parts of the world,
I remember that, like
and
a
they
trumpet.
and it reminded me of the sound of trumpets.
Matt, you didn't hear that. Did you guys hear the sound?
We heard it.
That's amazing. I haven't met anyone who actually witnessed it firsthand.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
where were you?
well, I was home and we were hearing it out of our
Um,
window, and
oh,
I went to the window and I looked at my wife and I said, I hate to say it, but it freaking sounds like trumpets to me. And
wow.
and of course, like all the scientific people come out saying, oh, it's the earth making noises and sounds, and it's
Never did before.
yeah. and and or it's an experiment, from the government nearby, or and I'm just sitting there going, I don't, I swear to God, they sound like trumpets to me.
And I read that it literally happened worldwide. So I heard about it happening in parts of Russia, Siberia, in Israel. It was reported.
Yes.
I don't remember where else, but I mean, it really was worldwide. So
Yeah.
so you can't pin that on like a government experiment or
Oh,
and those are just hypotheses, nothing to
yeah.
back it up.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I can now officially say I met someone who heard the trumpets. Yeah,
Yeah. And I just thought to myself, the first thing that came to my mind was Revelation, and
yeah.
all
Wow.
the and all what we've been sharing with everybody tonight. And when you read the part about the trumpets, it's like when you actually hear that with your own ears, it's like I get goosebumps and my hair stands up, and you
Yeah,
know
yeah. Listen, and I just want to say I know we're already kind of past time here, but I just want to say that it's very important that people understand that if we're on the right side of this, when it all comes down, that there is no reason to be afraid. It's not scary events. When Noah and his family were in the ark and the flood is happening and they're hearing the screams outside. I mean, that's scary. Or Lot is escaping and sees the big flash behind him. Right? I mean, it's scary when that stuff hits. But
yeah,
but a good friend of mine who actually is watching, Sharon Jackson, I see her name on
I,
the
see.
chat there. She goes to my class and everything, but she's been with me for years. But she wrote to me this morning. She said, "Hey, when you go on the radio show, you have to remember this." And I didn't remember until just now, but so it's for this moment. Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. Oh, one of your viewers said that they heard it too. Wow, Josie.
Yeah, that's my wife.
Oh, okay, okay. So there you go. But Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. You remember I said that the Great Tribulation begins in Revelation chapter 8. So this is right before the 7-year Great Tribulation begins. What John writes is that there's four angels holding back the four winds. In other words, these natural disasters that God's going to unleash upon the earth, right? But before they're allowed to do that, release those, that God sends his angel around the entire earth to seal his people on our foreheads. So we've heard like the mark of the beast and all that. No, that God's the originator of that concept. He seals us on our foreheads for supernatural protection against all the things that are about to hit the earth. So it will be scary. We're going to see these things happen. But if you're on God's side in all this, and you're one of God's people, and His angel seals you, right? Amen. And He seals you on your forehead, you will be supernaturally protected. And however that looks, I can't even imagine the
Yeah,
variety of ways that God's going to direct us and protect us and take care of us.
yeah,
But that's an important message to leave with. So thank you, Sharon, for suggesting that. It did come up that just be right with the Father,
yeah.
please.
Amen.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been having fun here with Pastor Ryan Speakman. Um, Before we close the show, where can people get your books? Where to point them to? If you have a website, if you have any social media you'd like to get out there, where they could follow you. If you have a YouTube channel or anything like that, I know you also have your own radio show.
Yeah.
You tell our listeners how they can listen to your show, where to listen, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, I mean, like I think I've already put in 2 or 3 plugs during the show, but this is my book series, These Final Days, and part 1 and part 2 are on Amazon. I'm fervently working on part 3 right now, trying to get that out. It'll be a 5-part series by the time I'm actually done, maybe 6. But the easiest thing is just go to my website, thesefinaldays.org. So it's just like the book title, but it's thesefinaldays.org. And there you can click right to my books on Amazon if you like to purchase those. I think I'm charging like $1 for the Kindle version.
Nice.
You'll find a link to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/These Final Days. On there, I've got hundreds of teaching videos, little mini documentaries from my 3 trips to Israel, my recent trip to Lebanon, all major hardcore research trips for my topic. So really interesting, stuff. I've got, my pamphlet on there, The Truth About the Rapture, at the bottom of the first page. Again, it's free. Please download that and take a look. And then also there's information there about my radio program, which we turned into a podcast. It's all there. If you just go to my website and kind of poke around. And
yeah.
So thesefinaldays.org.
Nice. And you can also, on your books are on Amazon, right?
Yeah, they actually, part 1 I published in 2014, and they're still both on the bestseller list for this genre, which is great. And I sell books every single day, all these years later. And I think once I publish part 3, I'll see it, take off even more. But I don't make any money off my books. Every penny I make, I put right back in the ministry, use it to try to promote what we're doing here.
That's
so
respectable.
I should say I actually make my living as a software engineer, if you can believe that. So the ministry is all about the ministry. That's my focus.
That's very respectable, though. That really much respect.
Thanks. Yeah. It's like the Apostle Paul worked as a tent maker, and him and Timothy kind of paid their own way, and that's me, man. Making tents, so to speak.
Exactly. You gotta make money.
Right.
Yeah. You gotta put food on the table and a roof over your head.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, God's good. God's good. You can see behind me my man cave, my little private office here, and I got all my pictures and degrees on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. But Ryan, stay with me. We'll say our goodbyes after I close out the show here and let our listeners and viewers know what's coming up on Strange Oddities podcast. But I hope I was a gracious host tonight. I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Oh, you're great, Matt. You know what? Lifelong friends, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Anytime, for sure. When you come to Arizona, you got to come to Havasu. So
absolutely, anytime I can network and work with others out there, absolutely, 100%. I'm with you on that.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Guys, I hope you enjoyed Pastor Ryan Speakman. Again, I will share all your information on our Facebook page as well. I'll get that out there, and we'll see what we can do to help out the ministry. So, and
I'm sorry, Matt. I should mention too. Every other Thursday, I teach my class at my church. These Final Days. It's 6 p.m. It's not tomorrow, but it's Thursday of next week. Every other Thursday. Okay. And I live stream that, so that's another thing that people can access through my website. I don't want to.
Yeah, no.
That's kind of the guts. That's actually the guts of my teaching ministry.
Yeah.
So, please look for that.
Actually, why we're doing the Strange Oddities podcast tonight rather than on tomorrow night.
That's right. Yeah.
I accommodate whenever I can have a guest. I just said, I'm not just going to do Thursday nights. I said if I can accommodate their schedule and do it on a night that they're available, I rather do that and not miss having a great guest like Pastor Ryan speaking.
I appreciate that. And as it turned out, I don't have class tomorrow, but I have to get up at 4:45 a.m. the next morning for the radio show.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this on Wednesday. Way easier for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. So, All right. I'm going to minimize you real quick and going to close out the show with everybody. So I'll talk to you in like 1 minute.
Sounds good. God bless everybody.
All right.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. So, guys, that was Pastor Ryan Speakman. Hope everybody enjoyed our guest this week on the Strange Oddities podcast. I know the audio was a little off, I think, but for the most part, I thought the audio sounded pretty decent. But yeah, it sounded good on my end. Apologies if someone, I think there was someone out there that said the audio was kind of off a little bit, but My apologies if that person had a hard time listening. But I thought it was a great show, very educational in the topic of the end times, the rapture. I hope we got into really in-depth detail about what the rapture is. Again, go to his website to learn more information about his teachings and what he preaches and what his work is about. Really nice gentleman. Really, I couldn't have had a better show tonight with Pastor Ryan Speakton. Guys, next week again, my show will be, I believe, Tuesday, April 19th. I'm moving it to the 19th, not because of the guest, but I'm on vacation this week. I'm going to Virginia. I'm going to be speaking at a big event called EnigmaCons 2022 with my wife, Josie. We're going to be talking about the Amityville Horror House at St. Albans Sanatorium. I can't wait. So if you're going, please join our presentation for the Amityville. It's going to be a unique spin on the history and the phenomenon of the Amityville infamous horror house. All right, guys, next week I have Tom Casey. Believe it or not, Tom Casey is the former CFO of Blockbuster. You guys remember VHS tapes, go into Blockbuster and rent a movie? You couldn't wait for a new release to come out, so you had to go to the store, put your name on the list, and whenever there was a new movie, they'd call you up or let you know, you got a new VHS tape, waiting for you to rent. Blockbuster is no more. They kind of downsized over the years and went out of business. I thought Blockbuster was great. Believe it or not, there's one left in the world. Oregon, out of all places in the world, Oregon is where there's one Blockbuster store left in the entire world. And Tom Casey is the former CFO of Blockbuster. They recently had a documentary, and he's going to be on the Strange Oddities podcast next week, Tuesday, April 19th. And I can't wait to have him on the show. And it's going to be a show about nothing but nostalgia, because when you think of Blockbuster, you're going to think of the 80s and early 90s and all the good nostalgia during those time periods. So it's going to be a fun show. I can't wait to have him on. Hope everybody tunes in, and I'll see you all next week. So I'm going to close out the show with the video. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Really, amen to you guys, and be well. Have a great night, guys, and enjoy the little video. Here we go.